5 were lost, horror stories. 1. Back to civilization. As I ventured deeper into the dense forest, my heart pounded with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The allure of hiking off the beaten path had always enticed me, but this time I was in for more than I had bargained for. The sun hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows that danced through the thick foliage. The rustling leaves whispered secrets, and the wind seemed to carry eerie, distant whispers. The forest felt alive, and not in a comforting way. I followed what seemed like a faint game trail, believing it would lead me back to civilization eventually. But the path twisted and turned, and soon the dense canopy overhead had swallowed the sky, plunging me into an eerie twilight. My surroundings became increasingly unfamiliar. I checked my phone for a signal, but there was none. Panic began to creep in as I realized that I had no way of communicating with the outside world. The battery was draining fast, and with every passing moment, my situation grew more dire. With each step, the forest grew more ominous. The trees seemed to close in on me, and the once serene sounds of nature became a cacophony of rustling leaves and strange, distant cries. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something lurked just beyond my field of vision. As night fell, a bone-chilling cold swept through the forest. I fumbled to start a campfire, but my trembling hands struggled to ignite the damp wood. The darkness that enveloped me was suffocating, broken only by the weak flicker of the fire. Sleep eluded me that night. The forest came alive with eerie noises, unearthly cries, the scuttling of unseen creatures, and whispers that seemed to mock my predicament. I huddled closer to the dying fire, clutching my flashlight like a lifeline. Morning brought no solace, for the forest looked no different than it had the night before. My sense of direction was utterly lost, and despair gnawed at the edges of my sanity. How had I let my adventurous spirit lead me into this nightmare? Days turned into a blur of disorientation and dread. I rationed my food and water as best as I could, but the forest seemed insurmountable. I felt like a tiny, insignificant speck swallowed whole by the ancient, malevolent wilderness. Weeks passed, or was it months? Time had lost all meaning. My strength waned, and I knew that I couldn't endure much longer. Every step felt like a Sisyphean struggle, and the forest's dark heart seemed to feed on my despair. And then, just when I had all but given up hope, I stumbled upon a familiar landmark, a fallen tree I vaguely remembered passing on my ill-fated journey. Tears of relief welled up in my eyes as I realized I was on the path back to civilization. Exhausted, emaciated, and broken, I emerged from the forest that had held me captive for what felt like an eternity. I vowed never to stray off the trail again, for I had glimpsed the true horror that lurked in the heart of the wilderness, and it was something no one should ever have to face. 2. The country house. I had been driving for hours, winding through the desolate countryside, trying to find my friend's house. This was a time before GPS and my sense of direction had failed me, and the sun was sinking low on the horizon. I should have turned back long ago, but my determination to reach my friend's place drove me deeper into the maze of backroads. Finally, as twilight began to settle, I spotted a dilapidated sign, almost hidden by overgrown bushes, bearing my friend's last name. With a sense of relief, I turned onto an even narrower road, following it deeper into the countryside. The road twisted and turned, leading me through thick woods, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. An uneasy feeling crept over me, but I pushed it aside, attributing it to the fading light and the isolation. Finally, I reached the end of the road, and there it stood, a decrepit, foreboding house that seemed frozen in time. Its windows were shattered, the roof sagged, and the whole structure appeared to be on the verge of collapse. My heart sank as I realized I must have taken a wrong turn. Just as I was about to turn the car around, a figure emerged from the darkness. He was a gaunt, disheveled man, his eyes sunken and wild. He stumbled toward me, his voice quivering as he spoke. "You shouldn't be here. This place, it's cursed." Fear gripped me, and I hastily tried to reverse, but my car's tires spun in the mud. Panic set in as the man reached my window, his face contorted with madness. He yanked at the handle, trying to force his way inside. I fumbled for my phone to call for help, but the battery had died. The man's frantic attempts to enter the car grew more aggressive, and I realized I had no choice but to fight for my life. Summoning all my strength, I kicked the door open, sending the man sprawling backward. I sprinted into the darkness, crashing through the underbrush, not daring to look back. His enraged cries echoed behind me, growing fainter with each step. Hours later, exhausted and disoriented, I stumbled upon a road and flagged down a passing car. They called the police and I was rescued from the nightmare that had unfolded in that forsaken house. I never did find my friend's house, and I never returned to those desolate back roads. That terrifying encounter left me scarred, a reminder that sometimes the road less traveled leads to unimaginable horrors. 3. Friend Hunt. The sun had set, casting long shadows through the dense woods near my house. A chill crept through the trees as my friends and I gathered for a game of manhunt, our favorite pastime. We had played countless times before, but this night was different, and the woods seemed more ominous than usual. As I drew the short straw and became the first, I counted to 100 with my eyes closed while my friends scattered into the woods. The rules were simple. Find and tag everyone before they reached the safe zone near the old abandoned cabin deep in the forest. As I set off into the darkening woods, a sense of unease settled over me. The rustling leaves and snapping twigs sounded louder, more sinister, and the moonlight filtered through the trees cast eerie shapes on the forest floor. My friends' laughter echoed in the distance, teasing and taunting. I pursued them relentlessly, but they proved to be elusive prey. Each time I thought I had them cornered, they slipped away into the shadows, their laughter growing fainter. Panic began to gnaw at the edges of my determination. I decided to head towards the abandoned cabin, thinking that maybe some of my friends had already reached the safe zone. But as I approached, I froze in my tracks. The cabin stood before me, a decrepit relic from a forgotten era, its windows shattered, and its wooden boards groaning in protest against the wind. My friends' voices drifted from inside the cabin, but something about it felt wrong. The laughter sounded distorted, unnatural. Fear clawed at me as I stepped inside, the rotten floorboards creaking under my weight. The interior was shrouded in darkness, and I fumbled for my flashlight. As its beam cut through the blackness, I gasped in horror. My friends were there, but their faces were twisted in grotesque, nightmarish grins. Their eyes were vacant, devoid of humanity. I stumbled backward, trying to escape the nightmare unfolding before me, but the door slammed shut with a deafening crash. Panic surged through me as I realized I was trapped with these grotesque doppelgangers. The corrupted versions of my friends closed in on me, their distorted laughter growing louder and more menacing. I felt a searing pain in my chest as one of them touched me, and I knew I was lost. In the distance, I could hear my real friends calling my name, their voices filled with concern. But I was no longer the person they knew. I had become one of the horrors that haunted the woods, a lost soul forever trapped in a nightmarish game of manhunt. 4. Lost pickup. Florida had always been a dream vacation spot for me, but what started as a sunny escape quickly spiraled into a nightmare I'd never forget. I was exploring the vibrant streets of Miami, lost in the colorful chaos of Ocean Drive, when I decided to take a leisurely stroll down an unfamiliar side street. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the palm-lined avenue. As I walked further, the streets became eerily empty. The neon lights of the bars and clubs faded into the distance. My heart began to race as a sense of unease washed over me. I realized I had ventured far from the bustling tourist areas and had no idea how to get back. Feeling like I was being watched, I quickened my pace. I rounded a corner, and there she was, a woman, tall and slender, standing in the shadows of an alleyway. Her eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity, and her lips curled into a wicked smile as she approached. "Lost, are we?" she purred, her voice dripping with a strange, melodic charm. I hesitated, unease coursing through me. She seemed like an ordinary woman, but something about her set off alarm bells in my head. Before I could respond, she reached out, her fingers brushing against my arm. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over me, and my vision blurred. Panic surged as I realized I had been drugged. I stumbled backward, my limbs heavy and uncooperative. The woman's sinister grin widened as she moved in closer. I desperately tried to call for help, but my voice was reduced to a feeble whisper. Just as she was about to grab me, a group of passers-by appeared, drawn by my feeble cries. The woman cursed under her breath and disappeared into the shadows. The strangers rushed to my side, helping me regain my senses. They called the police, who arrived promptly and took my statement. It was then that I learned the chilling truth from a news report. They had been searching for a woman matching her description, someone who had been drugging and kidnapping unsuspecting tourists. I shuddered at the thought of what could have happened if those strangers hadn't come to my rescue. Florida, once a dream vacation destination, had become a place of nightmares, and the memory of that creepy woman's sinister smile would haunt me for years to come. 5. The light of fire. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, the towering trees blocking out the sun and casting the woods into perpetual shadow. I had been hiking for hours, convinced I could navigate these woods without a map or GPS. That was my first mistake. As the day wore on, I realized that I had no idea where I was. The trail markers I had been following had seemingly vanished, leaving me stranded in this dark and eerie wilderness. My sense of direction had failed me, and panic began to creep in. I decided to retrace my steps, but every path I took only led me deeper into the tangled thicket of trees. The woods seemed to shift and change, as if they were playing a sinister game with me. The once familiar surroundings now appeared alien and menacing. I called out for help, but my cries were met with a haunting silence. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed my voice, leaving me utterly alone. Fear gnawed at the edges of my sanity, and I realized that I was truly lost. As night fell, the woods transformed into a realm of darkness and shadows. Strange, unearthly sounds echoed through the trees, the hoot of an owl, the rustling of unseen creatures, and something else, something that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to make a campfire, but my trembling hands struggled to ignite the damp wood. The darkness that enveloped me was suffocating, broken only by the weak flicker of the fire. I huddled close, clutching my flashlight like a lifeline. Sleep eluded me that night. The forest came alive with eerie noises, unidentifiable whispers, and a sense of being watched. Every sound, every movement, made me jump in terror. I was a stranger in this haunted wilderness, and it seemed intent on keeping me as its captive. Days turned into a blur of disorientation and dread. My supplies dwindled, and I knew that I couldn't endure much longer. I had become a mere speck in this vast, unforgiving wilderness, and the forest's dark heart seemed to feed on my despair. Just as hope was fading, I stumbled upon a clearing, a break in the endless trees. Relief washed over me as I realized that I had found my way out. Weak and emaciated, I emerged from the forest, vowing never to take nature's power for granted again. The experience had left its mark on me, a haunting reminder of the terror that comes from being truly and utterly lost in the heart of the wilderness. Which story caught your attention the most? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Until next time, stay safe. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Check out my website in the description below to see what I'm writing, and just below there are some suggestions related to what we talked about today. Peace!